Launching in 1976 in a local newspaper, within a matter of years, Garfield exploded into the mainstream, almost immediately becoming one of the most well-known and most beloved comic strip characters of all time. Garfield quickly became a merchandising behemoth, rivaled only by Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny, and Snoopy for popularity. Making the jump to the screen, Garfield would go on to star in a dozen animated specials, 3 television series, and 3 big screen adventures. In 2024, Garfield celebrates 48 years and stars in his first fully animated theatrical movie. In this video, we'll trace his evolution from 1976 to now, touching on his design and thematic changes over a near 5 decades. In this edition of Cartoon Evolution. Cartoonist Jim Davis credits his passion and talent for cartooning to his childhood asthma. Growing up on a farm in Muncie, Indiana, Davis was surrounded by animals, including about 25 cats at any one time. Allergic to just about everything on the farm, Davis was often bedridden. His mother insisted he use the downtime wisely, encouraging him to explore his creative side with a pencil. Davis soon found drawing to be a way of communicating, learning to use pictures with words to convey a story. Davis's continued love for cartooning eventually led him to become art editor of his high school's newspaper, where he ran original cartoons. In 1969, Davis set up a meeting with local cartoonist Tom Ryan, artist and creator behind the Tumbleweeds comic strip. Seeking advice on how to break into the industry, Davis showed his art portfolio. Impressed by his artistry, Ryan offered him an assistant role. Davis spent the next few years working on Tumbleweeds, doing backgrounds, borders, and balloons. In the role, Davis picked up the discipline of hand and learned how to put together a feature. By March 1973, at 28 years old, Davis had created Norm Nat, a weekly strip which ran in the Indiana-based Pendleton Times newspaper. The strip focused on the titular character, a straight man insect paired against a revolving roster of insane supports. While Davis saw great potential in the strip and its humour, for nearly 3 years he failed to draw interest from syndicates for national distribution, leading to its cancellation in December 1975. Based on some editor feedback which claimed, "The art's okay, the gags are great, but nobody can relate to Bugs," Davis looked to other popular strips to help him come up with a good, marketable character. He observed an obvious popular trend: cartoon dogs. Notably, there was Snoopy from Charles M. Schulz's Peanuts, Brad Anderson's Marmaduke, and Alex Graham's Fred Bassett. But there were no cats. Davis exclaimed, a light went off, realizing that if dog lovers like dog strips, surely cat lovers would like to see a cat strip. On January 8, 1976, 1 week after the retirement of Norm Nat, Davis launched a brand new strip in Pendleton Times titled John. The strip focused on artist John Arbuckle and his rotund, lethargic cat, Garfield. John took his name from a 1950s coffee commercial Davis remembered from his childhood.
Coffee merchant John Arbuckle was blending a special gift coffee for his friends.
While Garfield was named after his grandfather, James A. Garfield Davis. From the very first strips, Davis set the foundations that would later define the characters. John's happy-go-lucky, oblivious personality, and Garfield's weary, lazy, sarcastic, and cynical nature, as well as his penchant for lasagna. Side characters were also introduced, including John's roommate, Lyman, and his dog Spot, a white beagle with a black spot. The art style, of course, given his limited resources at Pendleton, was incredibly basic and simplistic. Davis found difficulty in building the strip around a human character and wanted to avoid certain controversies that Ryan had faced working with humans on Tumbleweeds. He also knew that if he wanted major success, he needed to make an icon out of an animal, later saying, "Snoopy is very popular in licensing, Charlie Brown is not." Regardless, Davis wanted to depict Garfield as a human in a cat suit, believing cats to have a human-like personality. All of Garfield's traits were those of a human: overeating, oversleeping, being lazy, traits Davis found disgusting in a human but endearing in a cat. Readers clearly agreed, and it became clear that the true heart and star of the comic was Garfield. On September 1, 1977, nearly 2 years after launch, the strip was rebranded from John to Garfield. The strip only lasted a further 6 months in Pendleton, as Davis signed a national distribution deal with United Features, the same syndicate that Peanuts called home. Retired from Pendleton in March 1978, Garfield debuted in syndication in 41 national newspapers on June 19, 1978. The strip now ran daily, with single black and white strips on weekdays and Saturdays, and larger colour strips on Sundays. Davis was also afforded better resources, resulting in an obvious leap in artwork quality. For some of the earliest syndicated strips, in fact, Davis repurposed and upgraded various Pendleton strips. Additionally, Davis took the opportunity to change Garfield's design, now depicting him as an even more rotund tabby cat with stripes. Spot also saw a major overhaul. Given that United Features already had a very famous white beagle, Davis changed his colour to yellow. And as they already had a dog named Spot in their Bonus Arc strip, his name was changed to Odie. Garfield remained a lasagna-obsessed fat cat, while other trademarks were added, such as his major dislike for Mondays. John and Garfield's relationship also remained the same, with the former constantly annoying the latter. Essentially a non-verbal character, Garfield retorted to John's quippy statements via thought bubbles, breaking the fourth wall to interact directly with the reader, though there is a long-running debate over whether John can actually understand him. Most agree he can't. In writing Garfield, Davis drew inspiration from the comics of his childhood, taking the great physical humour of Mort Walker's Beetle Bailey, the outlandish fantasy of Milton Caniff's Steve Canyon, the artwork of Walt Kelly's Pogo, the silliness of Johnny Hart's BC, the very broad humour and fun of Brant Parker and Johnny Hart's The Wizard of Id, and the often silent nature of Carl Thomas Anderson's Henry. Most of all, he modelled the strip after Schultz's Peanuts. He loved the strip's interpersonal relationships and powerful yet very simple messages, and aimed to match its sunny, humourless monotony. Garfield quickly amassed a large fan base, yet 1 month in, the Chicago Times, the largest newspaper with the strip, dropped it. In response, fans wrote letters angrily demanding his return. The influx of complaints convinced the paper to pick Garfield up again only 2 weeks later. As an apology, they exclusively commissioned a special strip for his return. The blunder got even more eyes on Garfield, with more major papers snapping it up quickly. Davis noted, "It gave me a good feeling that maybe Garfield had staying power already." Garfield the strip evolved rapidly. Davis said at the time, "The first 2 or 3 years I got all the obvious cat gags out of the way. Now I can take advantage of the fact people know him." Storylines became cleverer, the humour sharper, and the artwork more detailed. Garfield the character also saw a very slow Darwinian evolution, in which his design and physical attributes slowly changed over the first few years. Throughout 1978, Garfield's eyes grew bigger and less squinty, and by the year's end, he was even rounder and cuter. By 1979, his shape had changed once again, with his ears made shorter. In mid-1980, he began resting predominantly on his hind legs instead of all fours. Davis's reasoning for changing Garfield so much was simple. It opened more possibilities for storytelling. He initially found limitations in Garfield's movements, calling his original design a big lump of clay, and slowly made changes to allow him to move a little more freely and do something new, such as reach for the pizza pie on the shelf or kick Odie off the table. He also found that making Garfield more cartoon-like made him more expressive with better communication, and allowed stronger gags and more physical humour. Soon, Ballantine Books approached Davis with a proposal to print a book compiling Garfield strips. Having considered it previously, Davis wasn't a fan of the mass-market paperbacks that was the standard. This format cut the strips apart and ran them vertically, which he felt threw off comedic timing. He accepted Ballantine's offer, but only if the book could be printed horizontally, retaining their original layout and preserving their artistic integrity. Another coup was that bookshops weren't equipped to display horizontal books, and special displays would have to be created for end caps and store registers, in turn drawing more attention to the book. The result was 1980's Garfield at Large, which was so popular it remained a New York Times #1 bestseller for 2 years. The book's layout revolutionized comic and art books, and today is still referred to as the Garfield format. Also in 1980, Garfield saw his first jump to animation in CBS special The Fantastic Funnies, a salute to comic strips which included animated segments bringing various characters to life, also including tumbleweeds. In his brief minute-long segment, Garfield is introduced as a newcomer, and various strip gags are adapted. Garfield is even briefly seen on screen with 3 of his inspirations: Snoopy, Fred Bassett, and Marmaduke. Here, animation was handled by Lee Mendelsohn and Bill Melendez, the team behind the Peanut specials. By 1982, Garfield was in over 1,000 newspapers and had become a multi-million-dollar merchandising behemoth. Garfield was plastered across almost everything imaginable, and Garfield plush dolls became a prominent icon of late 20th century pop culture, remaining collector's items over 40 years later. To oversee the immense rapid swarm of licensing, Davis founded Paws Incorporated, doubling as a comic studio and production company. Now it was only natural that Garfield make a proper jump to animation. The Peanut specials had proven popular since 1965, and many of the then 20+ cartoons were heralded amongst the greatest animated films ever produced. United figured that Garfield was ripe for his own series of specials, and put his very first Here Comes Garfield into production. Naturally, the Peanuts team of Mendelsohn and Melendez were tasked to produce and animate, while longtime Peanuts director Phil Roman took the director's chair. They felt that Garfield had the potential to be another Charlie Brown, but had to make sure his transition to the screen was seamless. Their biggest hurdle was how to move him. Melendez noted,
"We have to try to keep him pompous and ponderous and slow. Although it's very difficult because our animation instinct is to move him, to cartoon his movements even more than we do. But since he's such a cool cat, such a heavy, fat, self-satisfied cat, we have to move him slow."
Taking cues from Davis, who wrote and oversaw the short, they ultimately decided on animating Garfield like a human, even recording reference footage of the special's songwriter Desiree Goyette. For the opening song and dance number, Charles Schulz, who was in the studio working on the latest Peanut special, offered feedback, stating, "The problem is you've made Garfield's feet too small, little tiny cat feet. Garfield's body once again evolved out of necessity. His feet got bigger, his legs got larger, and he was now able to stand, walk, and dance on his hind legs. Despite this evolution, Garfield still spends most of the short walking on all fours. Regardless, Garfield's newfound bipedal, anthropomorphic ability crossed into the comics, where by 1983 he was almost entirely walking on 2 legs. To voice Garfield, the team cast the dreary, dulcet tones of Lorenzo Music. Music was previously a writer on The Mary Tyler Moore Show and its spin-off Rhoda, though gained popularity as the voice of Rhoda's doorman Carlton, only ever heard over the intercom.
Say, there's a Stephen down here to see you.
Good, Carlton. Just send him up, thank you.
Okay, but I shouldn't. I'm on a break.
Finding the role easy work, Music was keen to tackle more voice performances. So much so, a pilot for an animated spin-off series starring Carlton was even produced. On landing Garfield, he said,
"I didn't really prepare. I read some of the Garfield books, there were 3 at the time, and I just realized that I understand this cat, and I am this cat." It's one of those things that, when it's right, it's right. It worked.
Music's performance as Garfield worked so well, he remained the iconic voice of the character for nearly 2 decades.
Rats. My owner must still be lolling around in bed. It's hard to find good help these days.
In later years, music refused to have his face photographed, choosing instead to keep the voice of Garfield largely anonymous. The cartoon told a very simple story, utilising gags from the strips.
Why don't you chase mice, like other cats?
Show me a good mouser, and I'll show you a cat with bad breath.
In it, Odie is taken to the pound, and Garfield sets out on a grand adventure to save him, but ends up detained too. Taking 6 months to complete, it aired on CBS on October 25, 1982, alongside the classic 1966 Peanut special, It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, to an audience of 50 million. The special was so well received that it was nominated for 2 Emmy Awards, including Outstanding Animated Program, losing to Richard Williams' Christmas classic Ziggy's Gift. The next year, the team reunited for Garfield on the Town. The special saw Garfield getting lost after escaping John's car en route to the vet. Again, utilising gags from the strips, the short followed Garfield's hijinks on the town, where he finds his mother. Notably, it's the only special in which Davis shared a writing credit, with music co-writing. Here, Garfield appears much the same, but as in the strips, was now mainly seen walking on hind legs, only occasionally resting on all fours. The special was also a success, this time taking home the Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program. As such, more specials followed, immediately becoming an annual television tradition. The third, 1984's Garfield in the Rough, saw a notable change in production, however, with director Phil Roman opening his own studio, Film Roman, to specifically handle full production of the specials, in turn taking it away from Mendelsohn and Melendez. Film Roman would also produce each following Garfield special. In the Rough won Garfield his second Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program. All up, 12 half-hour Garfield specials aired between 1982 and 1991, also including 1985's Garfield's Halloween Adventure, 1986's Garfield in Paradise, 1987's Garfield Goes Hollywood, 1987's A Garfield Christmas Special, 1988's Garfield His 9 Lives, 1989's Garfield's Babes and Bullets, 1989's Garfield's Thanksgiving, 1990's Garfield's Feline Fantasies, and 1991's Garfield Gets a Life. Throughout these specials, Garfield's appearance reflected that seen in the comics, though most following changes would be minimal. From 1986's Garfield in Paradise, however, he was seen as a fully bipedal cat, rarely, if ever, resting or walking on all fours. By the early 1990s, Garfield had again become rounder and longer, taking a cartoony design, which remains his most recognisable and iconic today. This design was first used in 1990's Garfield's Feline Fantasies and 1991's Garfield Gets a Life. The Garfield cartoons were largely consistent, though some were quite outlandish. 1988's anthology special, Garfield His 9 Lives, based on Davis's graphic novel, featured 10 shorts charting the history of cats Garfield style, and showing each of his 9 lives, seeing him as a cave cat, a king cat, a stunt cat, a space cat, and many more cats. Also based on the 9 Lives comic, 1989's Babes and Bullets was a black and white cartoon featuring Garfield as a film noir detective. Additionally, 1990's Feline Fantasies was a surrealist parody of 1947 Danny Kaye film The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which saw him slipping into numerous daydream fantasies. These saw Garfield and Odie as Old West cowboys, commercial jet pilots, James Bond-esque spies, and Indiana Jones-esque adventurers. The specials were highly successful, with 4 winning Emmy Awards and the other 8 nominated. Garfield's stamp on pop culture was further solidified when he made his first appearance as a walking character in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade 1983. In 1984's parade, he made his first appearance as a character balloon, which remained a staple of the parade for much of the 1980s and 1990s. In the late 80s, Davis attempted to get a theatrical Garfield movie produced, titled Garfield's Judgement Day. The film would have focused on Garfield rallying the neighborhood animals to warn the humans of an incoming tornado, which could mean the end of everything, and set out to stop the storm before it wreaks havoc. Davis wanted it to be bigger and better than the specials, with a fully fleshed narrative, a focus on more serious themes, and cinematic animation. He approached major studios, and Disney jumped on board to produce. The movie was fully written and storyboarded, voice performances and original songs were fully recorded, and 15 minutes of animation were completed. Ultimately, fearing its dark and depressing nature, Disney cancelled the production, and no other studio wanted to pick it up. Davis's attempt to produce it as a special also failed. Eventually, the project was repurposed as a picture book released in 1990. Another famously cancelled Garfield project was a 1984 Atari video game. Atari's numerous troubles at the time saw it cancelled. Many years later, with Davis's blessing, an unfinished ROM of the game surfaced online. Two Garfield games did get a release in the late 80s, however, 1984's Garfield Big Fat Hairy Deal and 1989's Japan exclusive A Week of Garfield, in addition to a number of educational computer games. These were followed by two popular 1990s video games, 1993's Garfield's Labyrinth and 1995's Garfield Caught in the Act. By 1989, some sources claimed that Garfield was the second most recognised cartoon character of all time, behind Mickey Mouse and tied with Bugs Bunny and Snoopy. Garfield took on another life between 1988 and 1994 in Garfield and Friends, a Saturday morning cartoon for CBS produced by Roman, Mendelsohn and Davis. Similar in style to the specials, Garfield and Friends adapted numerous stories and gags from the strips. As Davis had his hands full with the strips and specials, he couldn't possibly write the series, instead enlisting Mark Evanier as head writer. Davis helped with the treatments and directed voice recordings. Each episode presented 2 Garfield segments and 1 US Acres segment, based on Davis's short-lived second comic strip. The series ran for 121 episodes and 363 segments. Garfield made another evolutionary leap at the turn of the millennium, with his strips now printed in full colour every day. Around this time, Davis also acquired the rights to the black and white strips from United and began the laborious process of colorizing them. In 2003, to celebrate Garfield's 25th anniversary, Davis wrote a series of notable strips running over an entire week, which saw the contemporary and classic Garfield meeting for the very first time. As part of the celebrations, Garfield also returned to the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade as a brand new balloon, which made further appearances through to 2006. In 2004, Garfield made his belated debut to the big screen with Garfield the Movie, produced by 20th Century Fox. By this point, Garfield had been off the screen for a decade, so this was the grandest comeback imaginable. The film took the form of a live-action animated hybrid with humans, Odie and locations in live action, and Garfield in CG animation. As such, he was given a brand new design overhaul. While he remained somewhat cartoony, particularly in his facial expressions, to fit in with the real-life world, Garfield was designed to look like a real cat, and while he was anthropomorphized, design elements clearly drew inspiration from the earliest comics. Cast as Garfield was comedic legend Bill Murray, who matched the late Lorenzo Music's monotonous, sarcastic cadence. Easily Garfield's biggest, wildest adventure to that point, the film saw the cat off to save Odie after he is abducted. Not too dissimilar to the plot of his first special. Of course, the film took inspiration from the strips and classic gags. Despite opening to largely negative reception, the movie made over $200 million on a $50 million budget, and naturally a sequel followed in 2006. Garfield, A Tale of Two Kitties saw Garfield on a globe-trotting adventure to London, where he is mistaken for an aristocratic cat and taken to a lavish manor, where he begins to live a life of luxury, before trying to to claim his rightful place back in the world. The movie likewise met strong negative reception, mostly aimed at the fact that the unfunny movie was aimed at a very young audience. It however still managed to pull in a near $145 million at the box office on an expanded $60 million budget. Bill Murray has publicly shared his disdain for the movies on numerous occasions, with this gag even making it into 2009's Zombieland, where he plays a fictional version of himself.
So do you have any regrets?
Garfield, maybe?
Zombieland 2 also included a Garfield reference.
Why in the world Garfield 3?
Can this be just between us?
Yes.
Drugs cost money.
Though the theatrical Garfield franchise ended there, in 2007, Garfield's first fully animated movie, Garfield Gets Real, headed direct to video, also from Fox. Based on a 1996 script by Davis, the film sees Garfield escaping the cartoon world for the real world, as he grows bored with his life as a comic strip star. Here, Garfield appears in two designs, when in the cartoon world, he appears in his later bipedal cartoony look, and when in the real world, he appears in his earlier design as a realistic cat moving on four legs. Again, the movie was aimed at younger kids and received wide negative reception. Despite this, two more CG animated films went direct to video in 2009. Garfield's Fun Fest, where Garfield faces his biggest challenge yet at the annual Cartoon World Fun Fest talent competition, and Garfield's Pet Force, where Garfield forms a superhero team to fend off a sinister squadron of aliens and zombies. In these two movies, Garfield returns to his most iconic two-legged cartoony design, and while still low budgeted, the animation saw a slight uptick. In all three movies, Garfield was portrayed by legendary voice artist Frank Welker. In 2008, to celebrate his 30th anniversary, Garfield returned to TV with The Garfield Show, his first CG animated series. For the series, Evanier and Davis entirely created new stories, many of which broke the more traditional Garfield mold, seeing the characters off on big, wacky, wild, globe-trotting, time-traveling adventures with a kid-friendly approach. Here, Garfield appeared in the same design as the latter two direct-to-video movies and was again voiced by Welker. Each regular episode consisted of two 11-minute shorts, though the series also sported numerous special episodes, technically the first specials since 1991, including the 22-minute Christmas special, Home for the Holidays, 7 5-part 60-minute specials that formed the first half of Season 4, and the 50-minute season finale, Rodent Rebellion. Overall, The Garfield Show ran for 5 seasons and presented 247 segments across 107 episodes. By 2004, Garfield was appearing in over 2,500 newspapers and had more than 260 million readers globally, making it the most widely syndicated comic strip of all time and the fastest growing. Some reports even claimed Garfield as the most popular comic strip character ever. Garfield merchandise was also still popular throughout the 2000s and 2010s, and he appeared in a slew of beloved video games for numerous platforms. In 2011, he appeared in his first stage musical, Garfield Live, a musical with catitude, which toured America and Asia. In 2012, he appeared in his very first full-length monthly comic book published by Kaboom, which ran until 2015 for 36 issues, 32 of which were written by Evanier. Various special issues and spin-off series continued until 2018. In 2019, short-form series Garfield Originals premiered. With no dialogue, these 30-second vignettes, inspired by classic silent comedies, presented rapid gags through slapstick stylings. While the humour wasn't as clever, it leant heavier into the comic strip format than any other series. Here, Garfield appeared in his iconic cartoony design, with the series utilising a contemporary 2D digital animation. The series was presented across 24 3-minute episodes, each containing 5 shorts, for a total of 120 overall. The first 12 episodes premiered in December 2019, while a further 12 aired in June 2020. Also in 2019, Davis sold Paws Inc. to Viacom, now Paramount Global, who designated the Garfield brand to Nickelodeon. At the time of purchase, Nick announced a brand new Garfield series, though nothing has yet eventuated. The most prominent thing Paramount has done with Garfield is put him in a series of arcade-style crossover games, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 1 and 2, and Nickelodeon Kart Racers 3 Slime Speedway, where he appears as a playable character amongst a roster of Nickelodeon favourites. In 2024, 20 years after Garfield the movie, Garfield returned to the big screen in The Garfield Movie, his very first fully animated theatrical adventure. In production since 2016, prior to Paramount's acquisition, the movie was produced by Alcon Entertainment and released through Sony's Columbia Pictures. Dean Egg handled the animation. The movie sees Garfield in another new design, a CG version highly reminiscent of his iconic cartoony form with cinematic quality animation. This time, actor Chris Pratt was tasked with bringing Garfield to life, providing a brand new take on his voice. Easily Garfield's biggest adventure ever, the movie sees the cool cat reuniting with his long-lost father, Vic, a scruffy street cat, and joining him in a high-stakes heist. On release, the movie was met with largely negative critical reception, though audiences and fans responded more positively, commenting on the film's faithful style. Unfortunately, however, the movie failed to perform commercially, though taking in slightly more than estimates, its tepid $31 million opening, alongside that of Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, contributed to the worst Memorial Day long weekend box office since 1995. Hollywood trade paper Variety called this another reason for Garfield to hate Mondays. A near 50 years after Garfield's first appearance, Jim Davis, at almost 80 years old, continues to write the strips and draw rough sketches. Garfield remains an enduring and endearing icon of 20th century pop culture, and while he may not be at the zenith of his fame, it's great to see big things are still on the horizon for this Monday-hating, lasagna-loving, sarcastic feline. And at that, I want to know, what is your favourite Garfield design and what is your favourite piece of Garfield media? As always, join the conversation with all your thoughts down below.